Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the flickering, wax-scented world of a Byzantine candle maker. You're not a noble, not a scholar, not even a mildly important clerk. You're a soot-smudged artisan with cracked fingernails and an uncanny ability to spill hot wax on your toes. You live in Constantinople, the throbbing heart of the Byzantine Empire, where emperors reign from gold-drenched palaces, and you wake up to the sound of someone hawking boiled water. A rooster crows. Predictably smug. You groan. Predictably annoyed. The mattress beneath you is a glorified sack of straw that pokes you in places you didn't know had nerve endings. A spider A/B sails from the rafters like it owns the place. The air is cool, pleasant. Almost, before the forge of midday turns your workshop into a medieval air fryer. You roll out of bed. Your tunic smells like yesterday's tallow. Which is to say, like regret. You're pretty sure you fell asleep with the candle stub still smoking in the corner. But hey, nothing burned down. So, success? As your bare feet slap across the stone floor, you grab a chipped bowl, pour in the last of the barley porridge from yesterday, and chew mechanically. It tastes like sadness and slightly more sadness. But at least it's something. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You nudge open the warped wooden door. The street is already alive with a muted buzz. A man pushes a cart filled with clay jugs, calling out in a sing-song rhythm. Kids dart between legs chasing a hoop with a stick. An old woman mutters prayers while sprinkling herbs on her threshold. Some blend of superstition and spring cleaning. You blink up at the sky. It's that hazy in-between hour. The sun not quite risen, but the darkness retreating like a shy actor from a chaotic stage. In the distance, you hear the soft toll of a bell, one of the smaller churches. No doubt, already calling for matins. You know you should be starting the fire in your workshop. But you linger for a second, just watching the day stretch its limbs. Byzantium's skyline is a jagged mix of domes, towers, and laundry lines. Somewhere out there, scholars are unrolling ancient Greek manuscripts. Somewhere else, a general is polishing his helmet for an audience with the emperor. You, however, are about to spend the next 12 hours ankle-deep in melted animal fat. Because your job is candles, not the fancy ones the palace uses. Those are pure beeswax. Ivory-hued, and smell like distant floral fields you'll never see. No, yours are the gritty, functional kind, the stubby soldiers of the candle world. They're made from tallow, boiled down cow and sheep fat, delivered in gooey blocks that look like they should come with a warning label. Historians still argue whether tallow candles were ever considered luxury items for the urban poor or simply necessary evils. You'd vote for evil, personally. Your workshop is a narrow room tucked between a fishmonger and a man who swears he's descended from Cleopatra. It smells like salt, brine, and vague disappointment. Inside, the tools await. A large iron cauldron, soot-blackened and slightly dented from last month's minor explosion. Wooden racks for drying candles, and the coil of linen thread you'll twist into wicks later. You light a few coals beneath the cauldron with a flint strike. Sparks leap. Reluctant but obedient, a thin thread of smoke curls upward, joining the many other plumes across the neighborhood. You feed in kindling, watching as the flames grow bolder. A quick inventory of supplies reveals you're low on saltpeter, a whitening agent. You make a mental note to nag the spice seller down the street. The one who insists he has connections to India. He probably doesn't, but he does have saltpeter. Usually, as you wait for the cauldron to heat, you lean against the doorframe and watch a parade of clergy shuffle by in their embroidered robes. They glide past like celestial ducks, heads high, oblivious to the fact that their candles come from your grimy hands. One of them glances your way, sniffing the air, and visibly recoils. You grin. It's the little things. People rarely think about candle makers. You're invisible until their lamp sputters out, or they run out of tapers during Vespers. Then it's all panic knocking and whispered pleas. Just one more. For the love of Saint Theodora. I'll pay double. Spoiler. They never do. Still, there's something oddly peaceful about your craft. Repetitive. Predictable. The world can be chaotic. But wax melts the same way every morning. Fun tidbit. Some upper-class households use candle soot to make ink for writing scrolls. You tried it once. It turned your fingers purple for a week. And your scroll ended up looking like a squashed beetle. You'll stick to candle making. You cough as the fire flares unexpectedly. The cauldron's finally ready. You hoist the first slab of tallow and plop it in. It slaps wetly, sending up a mist of grease steam that fogs your brows. A few flies arrive. As if summoned, one does a kamikaze dive straight into the goo. Sizzling softly. You stare. The day has begun. And yes, it's going to get weirder. The tallow cart creaks into view like an exhausted actor arriving late to rehearsal. You hear it before you see it, wooden wheels groaning under the weight. The soft rhythmic snort of a donkey with more miles behind it than teeth left in its head. You step out just as the cart halts beside your workshop. The driver, a sunburned man who always smells faintly of onions and regret, hops down. His name? Probably Nikos. Everyone's name is Nikos. Morning, he grunts, wiping his nose with the back of his hand and offering you a look that says, "You better help unload this, or I will let the donkey do it for me." You sigh. It's too early for diplomacy. Together, you begin hoisting fat-laden bundles wrapped in wax-stained linen from the cart bed. The tallow is still semi-soft, a beigeish-gray substance that quivers in the morning air like it's alive and deeply offended to be handled. It smells. Oh, how it smells. If hope had a scent in hell, this would be it. Not even the worst chamber pots in the city's slums can quite match the particular bouquet of semi-rancid sheep fat warming under the Byzantine sun. You gag a little, but only once. You're a professional. After all, Nikos leans on the cart while you drag the last slab inside. "Big order came in from the Forum Baths," he says, scratching his armpit with a stick. 3 dozen ceremonial candles. For that new statue unveiling. The one with the suspiciously large sword. You nod, too tired to correct the euphemism. Public statues do tend to exaggerate. Historians still argue whether certain bathhouse ceremonies were genuinely pious or thinly veiled parties with a side of incense. But what they do agree on is that no event in Constantinople, holy or otherwise, felt complete without a ridiculous number of candles. Back in your workshop, you stack the tallow near the cauldron. The heat's rising. Little puddles are already forming around the base. You scrape some into a ladle and dump it into the bubbling mix. Careful to avoid splashes. You still have the scar from last month's tallow incident. It looks suspiciously like the emperor's profile if you squint and ignore anatomy. While you work, your thoughts wander. You wonder what a palace candlemaker's life is like. Probably better smelling. Definitely better paid. And they probably don't have to deal with donkeys that chew on their fence posts. You glance outside. The donkey is chewing on your fence post. Fantastic. As you trudge over to chase it away, you pass a group of neighborhood kids kicking a stuffed goatskin bladder around. They scatter briefly, then regroup around your workshop door, peering in like it's a haunted house. One of them dares the others to touch the ghost cauldron. You scowl. They run. But you can't blame them for being curious. Your workspace looks vaguely alchemical, blackened walls. Bundles of dried herbs for wax scenting. Jars of crushed resins. Even an old amphora you keep because it makes you look smarter. A temple official once asked if you were a philosopher. You said yes, and charged him double. He didn't question it. Back to the fat. You begin breaking the slabs into smaller chunks. Your knife squelches through the congealed mass with the sound of a boot in wet clay. Each piece hits the pot with a reluctant plop. And slowly the mix becomes a shimmering, murky liquid that coats the surface like an oil slick with dreams. Fun fact. Some people, wealthy eccentrics, mostly, request perfumed candles. You made one once with a dash of imported frankincense. It smelled divine. Then it exploded. Turns out, highly flammable resins and open flames don't make the best combo. You still have your eyebrows. Mostly. With the fire at full strength now. The cauldron bubbles like a gossip circle. You stir it with a long paddle. The tallow spiraling into thick, golden loops. There's something hypnotic about it. If you stare too long, you start imagining strange things. Like sentient wax people dancing a jig or Emperor Justinian personally inspecting your molds. You shake your head. Focus. A soft knock at the door. It's not a customer, it's Doria. The fishmonger's daughter. holding a small basket. Ma says you forgot your payment. She says, holding out a handful of dried anchovies wrapped in fig leaves. You nod solemnly and take them with the reverence of a man receiving sacred treasure. Dried anchovies are your lunch, dinner, and sometimes, let's be honest, midnight snack. Your place smells like death. She adds cheerfully, thanks. You reply, so does your fish. Touché. She grins and skips off. You stow the anchovies on a shelf and return to your molten creation. It's nearly ready. You dip a test wick into the pot and let the wax coat it once. Then again. It dries to a pale, almost creamy finish. Not perfect, but good enough to move on to the next stage. You ladle more wax into secondary pots for cooling. That's tomorrow's problem. For now, there's more fat to melt. Always more. You lean back on your stool, sweat trickling down your spine. And for a moment you let your eyes close. The city hums outside. Bells ring in the distance. A seller shouts about wine jugs. Someone's goat bleats indignantly. And in here, among the smoke and the stink and the ever-thickening air, you've got another 15 pounds of fat to boil before lunch. Joy. The pot is hissing now. The tallow simmers with an oddly soothing rhythm, like the world's least appetizing soup. You stir slowly, almost hypnotically, coaxing out the last stubborn lumps of fat. There's a calm to this stage of the process. Like the lull between two awkward parts of a wedding, everyone pretending things are going fine. The air is thick, and your tunic clings to your back. You can taste the grease in your mouth. It's like breathing through a meat-scented sponge. Welcome to the boil and bubble. You grab a second ladle, blackened from years of use, and begin transferring the liquefied tallow into shallower pans to cool. The metal sizzles on contact, and a puff of steam rolls across your face. For a fleeting moment, you smell nothing but cooked lamb and old iron. Honestly, you've had worse breakfasts. As you work, your mind wanders. You think about wax. Again, did you know that while most people in the city light tallow candles like yours, the imperial court exclusively uses beeswax? It burns cleaner, smells better, and, unfortunately, is 10 times harder to produce in quantity. You tried once, bought a whole jar of beeswax from an Armenian trader, made 2 candles and a small mess. You still find bits of it in your boots. Historians still argue whether tallow ever had any spiritual significance. Some claim low-grade candles were burned in mass ceremonies precisely because their smoke was earthier, a scent believed to rise directly to the nose of saints who preferred humble offerings. Others argue it's because tallow was cheap and nobody wanted to waste beeswax on people without titles. You finish pouring the last batch and move on to scraping the cauldron's edge. A thick brown crust clings to the rim like a clingy X. You chisel it off with the edge of a flat stone, muttering threats under your breath. You'll save the scrapings. Some customers actually ask for the crust. They believe it keeps rats away. You don't ask questions. Outside, the street is waking up more fully now. Horses clop past. A pair of scribes argue over scroll contents. And somewhere in the distance, the muffled clang of hammer on anvil rings out. Someone's forging a sword, probably, or a ladle, or both, it's hard to say. You settle back onto your stool and reach for the next task, wick preparation. But before that, a moment of appreciation. You wipe your forehead with a scrap of cloth and admire your workspace. It's smoky, messy, and a bit too warm, but it's yours. You remember inheriting it from your uncle. He died peacefully in his sleep. Though rumor says he used a candle stub to unclog a drain and met his end via tallow fumes. That story may not be true, but you tell it anyway. Your cat, a chunky, judgmental beast named Emperor Muse Tinian, leaps onto the workbench and stares at the cooling trays with undisguised disdain. You try to pet him. He bites you and stalks off. Typical imperial behavior. And then, flies. Lots of them. They arrive in a buzzing squadron, dive-bombing the trays like they're on a kamikaze mission. You swat at them with a branch of bay leaves, muttering a few select words your priest would disapprove of. You hang a few aromatic bundles near the trays, dried sage, rosemary, and, for good measure, a smidge of crushed garlic. It won't stop them, but it might make them rethink their life choices. A fringe detail most people miss? Some Byzantine homes kept geckos specifically for fly control. You once tried letting one loose in your shop. It promptly fled and set up residence behind your neighbor's toilet. Rude. The tallow cools slowly, forming a thick, glossy sheen that reflects the glow from a high-set window. It's kind of beautiful, in a, don't touch it, it'll melt your skin, sort of way. And then, your neighbor starts singing again. Loudly, off-key. It's either a hymn or a dramatic retelling of his breakfast. You bang on the wall twice. He sings louder. Fine. You roll your eyes and resume stirring. The trick to perfect tallow? Patience, constant movement, and a high tolerance for the smell of boiled sheep. You wonder, not for the first time, if you could switch careers. Glassblowing? Too hot. Scribe? Too quiet. Soldier? You'd last 5 minutes. One paper cut and you're crying. Nope. Candles it is. You hum a little tune to yourself. A mix of a lullaby your mother used to sing in the rhythm of market haggling. It's soothing. The heat doesn't feel as bad when there's a tune in your head. You fall into the motion. Stir. Scrape. Ladle. Cool. It's mechanical. It's meditative. It's probably taking years off your life. Eventually, the trays are full. You nudge them toward the drying rack with the edge of a broom handle and step back. You are, for the moment, caught up. You stretch your arms overhead and crack your knuckles. The joints pop like acorns in a fire. Your muscles ache in that familiar, dependable way. And you know, deep down, you've barely begun. But for now, the pot is empty. The flies have retreated. The smell of tallow lingers like an old friend you wish would go home. And the heat of the fire has faded to a comfortable warmth. You sip from a chipped clay cup of watered wine and let yourself relax for 20 full seconds. Then you glance over at the bundle of raw wick thread in the corner. Of course, wicks. The day never ends. You drag the bundle of coarse linen thread across the floor like a tired dog on a leash. Wick making is the part of the job no one romanticizes. You never hear a bard sing, "Oh, sing of the candle maker. Brave and bold, who wound the wick of destiny." No, because winding wicks is about as glamorous as scrubbing the bottom of a barrel. With your teeth, you plop onto the floor, cross-legged like a child about to listen to a very boring sermon, and pull the first skein of thread through your fingers. It's rough, scratchy. You're pretty sure it gave you a splinter once. You sort it into lengths using your foot as a crude measuring tool, heel to toe. Heel to toe. Snip. Precision isn't a strong suit in your line of work. Close enough usually works out. As you cut and twist each piece into a slightly stiff cord, you try to keep a rhythm. Snip, twist, loop, coil, repeat. It's like meditating, but instead of achieving spiritual enlightenment, you achieve back pain. Here's a fringe detail you love telling to customers who didn't ask. Some ancient wick recipes called for powdered salt to stiffen the thread and help it burn more cleanly. You tried that once, and the candle hissed like an angry goose. You haven't repeated the experiment. Emperor Muse Tinian returns, sits precisely on the middle of your wick pile, and begins licking himself in the most inconvenient location possible. You nudge him. He stays. You nudge him harder. He flops dramatically, as if you've wounded him. Candles you can control. Cats? Never. As the pile of prepared wicks grows beside you, your left leg begins to tingle, then throb, then go entirely numb. Fantastic. You shift position, trying to ignore the dead leg dragging behind you like an unwanted guest at a dinner party. You think, briefly, about the philosopher wax poet you read about once, a man who claimed candlelight was the purest source of divine inspiration. He also died after drinking spoiled goat's milk. So maybe don't take life advice from him. Historians still argue whether wick making was ever considered a separate trade or just part of the candle maker's duties. You're living proof it was the latter. And also that it should be outsourced to someone with more patience and fewer sore thumbs. You pause and hold up a bundle of perfectly measured wicks. For a moment, you're proud. Then you sneeze, and the whole stack collapses like a sad little yarn avalanche. You do not cry. Okay, maybe one tear. But you don't sob. Eventually, you move to hanging the wicks on a wooden rod. You thread them like beads on a necklace, spacing them evenly, leaving room for wax to build up without sticking. The frame looks vaguely like a rack for drying laundry. If the laundry were destined to burn, you prop the frame near the dipping station, ready for the next phase, the endless, brain-melting loop of candle dipping. But before you get there, you allow yourself a stretch. Your spine makes a sound like cracking pottery. The cat watches, unimpressed. You glance out the door. A procession passes, small, informal, and slightly chaotic. At the center is a man carrying what appears to be a very bored goat wearing a garland of rosemary. You have questions. None of them will be answered. Back inside, your fingers move on autopilot. You prepare the next rod. Then the next, threading and twisting, arranging each wick like a general lining up oddly scented soldiers. Once, during a particularly long wick winding session, you started naming them. You're not proud of this. But Little Bernie, Slim Wixon, and Tallow McFlameface were among your better creations. You check the batch by holding a few threads over a flame. They smolder just right, no sparks, no foul smell, no disappointment. Success. Time for a break. You stand, legs creaking, and pour yourself a little wine. It's weak and watery, but cold. You sip it slowly, staring at the rows of prepared wicks like a farmer admiring an oddly flammable crop. Emperor Muse Tinian has now fallen asleep in your wax scrap bucket. You decide to let it go. At least he's not eating it. A light breeze rolls through the window, carrying the smell of fresh bread, sea salt, and, because life is balance, a faint waft of horse droppings. You sigh contentedly. This is your kingdom, your empire of wax and string. You run your hand over the dipping frame once more, double-checking spacing. Experience has taught you that even one crooked wick will create a mutant candle. And mutant candles? They sell poorly and melt like sad bananas. As you tidy up the last of the scraps, you spot a familiar mark scratched into the floor near the door, a tiny starburst you carved years ago. Back when you first started and thought marking time would help. It didn't, but the mark remains, like a signature no one will ever see. You catch your reflection in a shard of polished bronze on the shelf. Your face is smudged, eyebrows lightly singe, and your hair has definitely hosted at least one spark today. You offer yourself a solemn nod. You're doing all right. And then the bell rings. The temple courier again, no doubt, but you ignore it for now. Because right now, you've got 24 wicks ready for the dance. Dip, dry, repeat. That's next. You stand before the dipping station like a knight preparing for battle, except your lance is a wooden stick. Your armor is sweat-stained linen, and your battlefield smells faintly of roasted goat fat. The rhythm begins. Dip, dry, repeat. You lower the row of wicks into the pot of warm tallow, watching as they disappear with a quiet plop. Count to 4. Pull them out. Each wick now has the barest glimmer of a waxy coating, thin as truth at a merchant's stall. You hang the rod on the drying rack, where the layer cools just enough to hold its shape. Then you do it again. And again. And again. Candles are not born, they are coaxed into existence through sheer repetition and the slow, resigned sighs of artisans with sore shoulders. Each pass adds just a little more girth to the candle, layer upon layer, like a tree ring or the emotional baggage from your first breakup. If you're careful, and you are, mostly, they'll end up straight and smooth, tapering beautifully at the tip. The trick is balance. If the tallow is too hot, it slides right off. Too cold, and it clumps like goat butter in January. You hover near the sweet spot, adjusting coals, sniffing the air like a wine snob evaluating notes of barnyard and regret. And all the while, dip, dry, repeat. You find yourself counting. Each batch gets around 60 dips before it's thick enough. Some makers rush it. You don't. You're a candle artist, or so you told a very bored monk once during a delivery. He didn't laugh, but he did order more candles. Historians still argue whether medieval candles were primarily utilitarian or symbolic. Certainly, churches used thousands, lighting altars, lighting icons, marking sacred moments. But the average home? One stubby candle at a time, used sparingly, often shared among family members. You've sold, half-burned, tapers to neighbors more times than you can count. One woman even tried to return one because it smelled judgmental. You didn't ask questions. Midway through your third set, your mind drifts. You imagine you're not a candle maker but a sorcerer, crafting light from darkness. The workshop becomes a mystical cave. The tallow, liquid gold. The wicks, magical threads blessed by the gods of illumination. Then Emperor Muse Tinian sneezes from the corner and breaks the spell. You refocus, arms aching slightly from repetition. You swap out the rod, hang a new one, and keep moving. The wax hardens into a dull ivory finish. No gloss, no shimmer, but solid, reliable. A neighborhood boy pokes his head through the doorway. "What ya doin'?" "Making a dragon," you mutter without looking up. There's a long pause. Then, "Cool," and the boy disappears. You smile. Somewhere behind the workshop, a lute starts playing. Badly. Your neighbor again. Probably trying to romance his wife. Or her sister. Or someone's goat. You've stopped keeping track. You dip a rod with extra care, spinning it slightly as it lifts from the tallow. This helps with even layering. You learned that from an old waxman who used to whistle through his nose when he worked. He disappeared one day, moved to Nicaea, or joined a monastery, depending on which gossip circle you believe. You still use his candle molds, though bent, battered, but they get the job done. As you rotate through your trays, you notice a small wax droplet forming at the tip of each candle. The drip point, you call it. It's the mark of a well-shaped taper. Once, a priest accused you of intentionally shaping them like teardrops to mock the sorrow of Lent. You didn't bother correcting him. You reach for a drink and realize you've sweat through your second tunic. The air inside the workshop is thick and heavy, like the inside of a baked fig. Your hands are slick with wax residue. You wipe them on a rag that's already more grease than cloth. Dip, dry, repeat. Each candle begins to look identical. Yet you know there are tiny differences. This one slightly curved. That one with a stubborn spot that won't coat evenly. You whisper small insults at them. They respond by cooling slower. The sun climbs higher, spilling light through the window slats. Dust motes drift like lazy bees, catching the glow. It would be poetic if not for the heat. You open the window wider. A pigeon flies in, lands on the edge of your drying rack, and stares at you with one beady, judgmental eye. "Not today," you whisper. It coos. You throw a rag. It leaves. Victory. You turn back to your latest batch. The tapers are nearly done. You give them one last dip, a sealing layer. Rich and smooth. This one matters. It's the layer that customers see. That burns longest. That smells the least like boiled livestock. You say a little nonsense blessing over it, mostly out of habit. "By Saint Polycarp and all that is waxy, may you burn long and drip little." You hang the final rod. And exhale. Your arms droop. Your shoulders ache. Your brain feels like it's been basted in goose fat. But the rack before you is full. Dozens of pale, waxen soldiers, lined up neatly, waiting for purpose, or fire. Same thing. You step back. You admire them. Then you trip over a loose stool and bark your shin. Of course. You curse under your breath. Limp to your seat, and sip the last of your wine. Dip, dry, repeat. You're done, for now. But lunch is coming. And you are very, very ready. You drape a damp cloth over your head like some kind of saint of exhaustion and step outside, hoping the midday air won't feel like stepping into a steaming pot of your own creation. It does. The sun's directly overhead, casting sharp shadows down narrow stone alleys. Your tunic clings to your back like a needy toddler. The candle workshop steams behind you. And for a fleeting second, you consider simply walking until you reach water, any water, and floating face down for a while. But no, there's business to attend to. The marketplace waits. You load the finished candles into a woven reed basket, carefully stacked so they won't bump or bend. These are your morning's effort, short, stout tapers meant for shopkeepers and common folk. No ornate flourishes, no ceremonial nonsense, just light. And Byzantium needs light. You hoist the basket onto your back, grip the bottom with one hand, and begin the trek downhill. The stone streets of Constantinople slope and curve like a half-forgotten labyrinth. They're uneven, cracked, and occasionally host to mysterious puddles that don't smell like water. You step carefully. As you near the outer edge of the Forum district, voices rise around you. Merchants cry their wares: salted olives, fresh ink, plaster figurines of St. Christopher, somewhat accurate, and the whole place thrums with chaos. Pigeons flutter overhead, scattering like gray confetti. A stray dog weaves between stalls, expertly avoiding kicks and stealing scraps. You make your first stop at a spice seller's booth. The man behind it is rotund, always smiling, and wears at least 3 rings that clack when he gestures. You've never seen him without a date stuffed in his cheek. "Ah, light bringer," he bellows. "You have the good drippy ones today?" You nod and lift the basket. He takes a few, weighs them in one chubby hand, sniffs them theatrically. Smells like tallow, he announces. Just like last time. Because it is tallow. He shrugs. Consistency. A virtue. My wife could learn from you. You do not ask what that means. He pays with a handful of coins and 2 figs, one squished slightly. But edible. You thank him and move on. Your next customer is a fishwife with no eyebrows and an expression like she smelled something unfortunate since 400 AD. She wants 7 candles for her shop, none of that perfumed nonsense. She barks. Last time, it made the trout smell suspiciously festive. You make the exchange. Her coin is chipped and smells like sardine. Still, it spends. Further down the market lane, things get weirder. A man in a patched cloak stands on an overturned crate, shouting about lizard powder. Blessed by Saint Anthony himself. Sprinkle it on your bald spot and awaken your follicles. He locks eyes with you and points. You, waxman, you look like you have questions. You absolutely do not. He barrels on. This man knows darkness. He creates it. Until he brings the light. He and I, we are kin of the candle and the cure. You shake your head and keep walking. He resumes yelling about hair. Historians still argue whether Byzantine markets leaned more toward economic utility or open-air theater. Based on today's performance, you vote theater. With bad lighting and very enthusiastic actors. You pass by a stall selling iron nails shaped like dolphins. Another is flogging imported silk dyed such a violent orange that it hurts to look at. You consider stopping for bread. But the line's long and the baker's yelling at someone about improper loaf etiquette. Instead, you settle beside a quieter alley and sit with your back to a sun-warmed wall. The bricks radiate a gentle heat, less aggressive than the forge at home. You pull the figs from your pouch, split one in half, and chew slowly. It's warm, slightly fermented, but sweet. Lunch in the alley. It's not much, but it's yours. As you chew, an old man collapses onto the stone beside you. He smells like onions and very old wine. His tunic is stitched with thread the color of regret. He looks at your basket. Candles? You nod. Thought about making statues instead? You glance at him. Statues of what? He squints into the sun. Anything. Fish. Saints. That goat over there. You both stare at a goat chewing rope. I make candles. You say simply. He grins, revealing 3 teeth and a stubborn optimism. Well, someone's gotta. He begins a story you didn't ask for. Something about his cousin marrying a woman who was secretly 2 women in a trench coat. You nod occasionally, watching people pass. Eventually, he stands, thanks you for the ear, and shuffles off. You let the silence settle around you. It's strange how loud the city is. Yet how quickly your brain learns to filter it. Hooves on stone. Shouting merchants. Crying babies. Clanging bells. It becomes a kind of music. An urban lullaby. You take the final bite of fig and dust off your hands. The basket's lighter now. A few candles left. Enough for a temple boy or a forgetful scholar. You pass a cart with broken wheels. A sleeping dog under a rug. And a teenager arguing with a chicken. You don't stop. You don't even blink. This is normal. Back toward the workshop you go. Basket under arm. Skin slightly sunburned. And sweat drying on your brow. You've delivered the light. You've met the madness. You've eaten a fig of questionable texture. It's been a good outing. And now, it's time to return to the wax. The walk back is slower. The basket is mostly empty. But your legs feel like they've been replaced by 2 particularly unhelpful fence posts. Your feet protest with every step, aching from stone, heat, and the ever-pleasant sensation of melted tallow that somehow found its way into your sandal. You pass by the same shouting baker, still debating with a customer over crust. The chicken-teenager feud appears unresolved. A pair of soldiers laugh loudly over a wine jug, one wearing a helmet that's 2 sizes too big and slipping over his eyes like a toddler trying on his father's boots. You reach your workshop and breathe in deeply. Regret. Yes, it still smells like every bad decision you've made in your candle career. But it's your space, your sweaty, smoky sanctuary of flame and fat. You set the empty basket aside, stretch your arms wide, and roll your neck until it makes a sound you're pretty sure isn't legal in some provinces. Your stomach rumbles, loudly enough to startle the cat. Lunch isn't glamorous. You reach for the packet of dried anchovies wrapped in fig leaf you stashed earlier. The anchovies are salty, chewy, and slightly suspicious, but they do the job. You sit on your favorite overturned crate, lean back against the wall, and let yourself pause. The light from the window has softened now, warm and golden. A single fly buzzes past your ear like an overcaffeinated bee. Emperor Muse Tinian appears beside you, sits like a dignified scribe, and stares longingly at your fish. You toss him a piece. He catches it mid-air and trots off like he earned it. As you chew, your eyes settle on a faded mural on your wall, painted by your cousin's child years ago. It's a lopsided depiction of a candle, a very confused-looking sun and what might be you. Or a potato in a hat. Either way, it's charming. You've never painted over it. A knock at the door breaks the peace. You drag yourself upright and open it to reveal a man in a soot-streaked cassock. Looking vaguely panicked, he introduces himself with unnecessary speed. Brother Arsenios, Church of St. Eudoxia, corner of Copper Street, past the olive cellar, left of the fountain that smells like wine. You nod slowly, trying to process that information. He blurts, "We need 12 dozen tapers by sunset. For Vespers, someone spilled lamp oil on the last batch. It was messy." You blink. 12 dozen? Yes. Small, uniform, unscented, no weird shapes. Father Demetrios says no more experimental candles. You briefly recall your attempt at sculpting a taper shaped like St. Nicholas holding a goose. It leaned. A lot. "I'll do what I can." You mutter. Brother Arsenios presses a tiny purse of coin into your hand, thanks you profusely, and rushes off like he's late for a fire, possibly caused by spilled lamp oil. You sigh. So much for your relaxing afternoon. You scan the workshop. Half a rack of dipped tapers remain, still drying. They'll need at least another hour before they're stable enough to trim. The rest? You'll have to start from scratch. First, boiling new tallow. Again, you throw kindling into the forge, stoke it to life with the bellows, and plop a fresh chunk of fat into the cauldron. The hiss and pop are as familiar as your own name. You prepare more wick, your fingers moving faster now. The rhythm already burned into your muscle memory. Dip, dry, repeat. At this rate, you'll be lucky to finish before your hands cramp permanently into candle claws. Outside, the sunlight shifts again, thinning, fading just slightly. Shadows stretch, time ticks. As the wax melts and the dipping resumes, you remember a story your uncle used to tell. That in the early days, before proper candles, people used rushlights, thin plant stalks dipped in fat and burned like sad, stringy torches. They were miserable, he'd say, but cheaper than sin. Historians still argue whether rushlights were widely used in urban centers like Constantinople, or just in the countryside. Either way, you're grateful for your linen wicks and your ever-melting pot of doom. You finish another set of candles, hang them carefully, and rotate the rack to face the breeze from the window. They sway gently, like sleepy dancers mid-curtsy. In a sudden burst of energy, or madness, you start singing under your breath. An old work song from the docks. Wax on the fingers, wax on the toes. Smells like a sheep in heaven knows. You forget the rest, or maybe you made that part up. You catch sight of Emperor Muse Tinian curled inside your basket, one paw over his eyes. For once, he looks peaceful. You envy him, but no time to dwell. You reach for the trimmers, curved bronze blades with just enough sharpness left, and begin snipping the cooled candle tips into perfect domes. Clean, symmetrical, pleasing to the priestly eye. Each snip leaves behind a little wax nub. You collect these in a jar. One day, you'll remelt them into bonus candles, or possibly a wax sculpture of your cat, if ambition strikes. The tapers are almost ready. You group them into bundles of 12, tie them with thin twine, and stack them gently in a wooden crate. You count aloud. 1 dozen, 2, 3. You lose count, start over, then lose count again when the cat sneezes. Eventually, 12 dozen. Exactly. You lean against the crate and let out a slow, measured exhale. Your hands are blistered, your back is furious, your face is streaked with something between soot and holy suffering. But you did it, and Vespers won't be in the dark tonight. The sun droops lower in the sky now, casting long amber fingers through the slats of your workshop. You blink sweat from your eyes and nudge the heavy crate of candles toward the door. It groans across the floorboards like a reluctant ox. You're tempted to ask it to groan quieter. You rest a moment, listening, not just to the street sounds. Those are always there, but to the deeper noise, the thick quiet of tired stone. The whisper of wax cooling on racks. The sigh of your own heartbeat slowing now that the rush is over. But peace? Not yet. A figure appears in the doorway, silhouetted by gold dusk light. You almost mistake it for a saint, until he trips over your doorstep and swears under his breath. Blessings upon this cursed floor, he mutters, dusting off his robes. A priest. Another one, this time in full vestment. Sleeves embroidered with silver threads that catch the dying sun. His hair looks like it's been recently smoked. Candle emergency, he says, completely deadpan. You look at him, then you look at your blistered hands, then back at him. Define emergency. He holds up a half-melted taper. Some fool left these too close to the incense braziers. They slumped. You lean in. It looks like someone tried to shape wax into a sad spaghetti noodle. We need replacements, he continues. Before the icon procession, there are pilgrims, important ones, from Antioch. You rub your temple. How many? 12. You laugh, too loud. Just 12? You were ready for another 12 dozen. Fine, give me an hour. He bows, deeply, awkwardly, and leaves behind the wax noodle as evidence. You set about preparing another dozen. This time from leftover scrap wax you've saved in a clay urn labeled, resurrection pile. It's filled with trimmings, blobs, and the occasional mystery lump that might be from last spring's failed rose-scented experiment. You stoke the fire, toss in the wax, and stir. It smells complicated, like something between burnt sugar and regret. While you wait for it to melt, you glance around the shop and spot a few partially formed candles still hanging. Misfits, slightly crooked, minor blemishes. You trim them, polish them, whisper gentle encouragement. Then, in a moment of resourcefulness even you admire, you redip each one in the resurrected wax. It gives them a glossy finish, like they've been buffed for a formal event. You tie them with crimson thread from a leftover temple order, pack them into a small box padded with straw, and place the melted noodle on top like a cautionary tale. You scrawl a note. Try not to redecorate the altar this time. Delivery done. Again, you lean back on your stool, arms folded, letting the silence stretch. And then, because why not, another knock. This time it's not a priest. It's a teenager from the Copper Quarter, clutching a parchment scroll with wax fingerprints and a confused expression. You the candle man? You nod slowly. My master says we need light. For the forge. Tomorrow night. You wait. He shrugs. That's it. You ask, how many? He squints. Enough to read numbers. Ah, specificity. Come back in the morning. You say, I'll have something. He runs off without a word, his sandals flapping like panicked fish. You shake your head and sip what's left of your wine. It's warm now, metallic, like if grapes had feelings and they were all sad. You think about the day, the deliveries, the mishaps, the noodle candle. It's strange how candle work touches everything, from forges to altars to back rooms of fishmongers. You make light, sure, but also ambiance, security, ritual. Some people light candles for warmth, others for weddings, others still for ghost chasing. Historians still argue whether candle makers in Constantinople had guilds or simply formed loose alliances of smelly camaraderie. You've attended a few late-night meetings at the tallow man's cellar, mostly drinking. Some complaining. Zero results. But still, there's something noble about your trade. Your candles may be stubby, uneven, or slightly crooked, but they work. They burn. They guide people through dark places. You hear a clatter outside. A small boy runs past, screaming something about an escaped goose. You don't look. You've learned better. Inside, the air thickens again, twilight folding in. The workshop dims, shadows stretching longer across the walls. You reach for a finished candle, trim the base, and light it with practiced care. The room fills with that familiar glow, soft, golden, humming gently like a lullaby you forgot you knew. You sit back and watch the flame dance. It flickers, leans, then steadies, the same way you do. Then, as always, you notice the soot. It gathers near the ceiling in a thin veil. Dark and quiet, you grab your broom, Gently swat at it, and wonder, not for the first time, if one day you'll wake up and the whole city will just be soot and echoes. But not today. Today, there's still light, still orders, still the warm hum of wax melting on the stove. And, if you're very lucky, still one clean tunic left in the chest. The air in the workshop shifts again, heavier now, with that telltale weight that says evening is preparing to wrap around the city like a shawl. You can feel it in your bones, in the way your hands slow down even when your mind's still buzzing with the day's list of deliverables and half-finished batches. You move to the back wall where your molds hang, hooks with all shapes and sizes of iron forms. From simple tapers to more elaborate ceremonial cylinders etched with crosses and little stars. Most are battered. One is dented into something that resembles a potato more than a candle, courtesy of a drop incident involving a fleeing cat and a startled carpenter. Tonight is for repairs. You pull the broken mold from your shelf. A seam on its side has split open slightly, probably from heat warping or that one time you used it as a makeshift hammer. A thin crack runs along the base, just wide enough to cause a wax leak, which you discovered when the floor began sprouting candle stumps like an orchard of failure. You sit cross-legged on the ground, stretching your legs and muttering thanks to whoever invented the sit down and fix it method of problem solving. You grab your mold fixer's trio, twine, beeswax, and whispered threads. First, you heat a dab of beeswax in a small clay dish over a candle's flame. It softens quickly, becoming pliable and sticky, medieval duct tape. Essentially, with one hand, you press the warm wax into the crack. It clings, reluctantly at first, then seals with a satisfying squish. You wind the twine tightly around the mold's body, pulling it taut like a belt on a feast day. The final touch is a firm press along the edges, using the heel of your palm, while you murmur a few creative threats involving exploding wax and public shame. The mold behaves. Historians still argue whether candle molds in the Byzantine period were mass-produced by metalworkers or handmade by the candle makers themselves. Yours? A bit of both. Some are inherited, others scavenge. One was definitely traded for a loaf of bread and half a dried pomegranate during that one lean winter. You set the repaired mold aside to cool and check your remaining stock. A few small pillars, some basic night tapers, one absurdly thick candle labeled Emperor's Beard, from a joke order last spring. You debated melting it down, but somehow it's too majestic. A knock. Again. You begin to wonder if your door's been marked with some secret sign that says, "He's home." And he's too polite to ignore you. This time, it's a child, the neighbor's boy, 5 years old, eyes wide as saucers, clutching a bent wax stub like it's treasure. "Is it true Julius Caesar invented wax?" he blurts. You blink. "What?" "My brother says Julius Caesar made candles so he could write letters at night." You pause. That is almost certainly not true. The boy looks devastated. "But," you add, "he probably used candles, very dramatic ones, with gold holders, and probably a servant to hold them." The boy nods solemnly. "I'm gonna make a candle that big someday." You hand him a tiny wax scrap. "Start with this." He grins, thanks you, and runs off, presumably to begin his Caesarean candle empire. You chuckle to yourself, remembering your own childhood fascination with light. You once tried to melt wax using a polished bronze mirror to focus sunlight. It scorched your eyebrows and melted a nearby grape. But it did work, sort of. Back to the workshop. You rotate the mold rack, check the cooled forms, and gently ease one finished candle out of its casing. It slides free with a satisfying pop. Smooth and unblemished. Perfect. You light another taper and carry it to the shelf near your door, where you keep the night pile, a collection of half-melted stubs, twisted wicks, and candles that no one will buy but you'll use to light your way during powerless evenings. The flickering glow fills the room, catching on the soot-lined walls, and the sheen of wax drips dried like frozen waterfalls. Your shadows stretch long across the floor. It feels like you're standing inside your own lantern. You pick up the repaired mold, turn it in your hands, and set it on the bench beside a fresh coil of linen thread. Tomorrow, you'll test it. Tonight, it rests. Just as you're about to settle into your crate chair again, something crashes. You freeze. The cat? You rush toward the sound and find the apprentice boy, not the little one. The other one, The teen from down the road who periodically sneaks into your shop, just to watch. He's knocked over a whole box of cooling tapers. Sorry, he blurts, cheeks red. You breathe in slowly. Count to 5. Exhale like you're blowing out a tiny, very judgmental candle. It's all right, you mutter. Just help me pick them up. As you both gather the fallen candles, he starts peppering you with questions. Why do some candles burn faster than others? What happens if you dip a wick before it's dry? Have you ever made a candle that turned into a fire snake? The last one, you're fairly sure, is a schoolyard myth, but you appreciate the enthusiasm. You explain patiently, showing him how to hold the tapers so they don't warp, where to stack them, which ones need re-dipping. His eyes track every movement like you're carving marble. Is this all you do? He asks, genuinely curious. Just candles? You nod. All day, every day. And you don't get bored? You pause, think. Some days. But then someone asks for a candle shaped like St. George's toe. And suddenly things aren't boring anymore. He grins. And you realize, this, too, is part of the trade. Passing it on, maybe not formally, maybe not with scrolls or gilt letters, but in conversations like this. In wax-slicked hands and simple questions. The boy leaves eventually, promising to return. You finally sit again. The night deepens, and the wax, somewhere, continues to cool. You're still seated, basking in the warm, gentle flicker of your wall-mounted candle stub, when a peculiar calm settles over the room. That deep, golden stillness that only arrives once the city exhales. It's evening now. The streets outside are quieter, just the occasional clatter of sandals on stone or the soft, rhythmic call of someone hawking sesame bread far too late for anyone except the chronically snack-inclined. You stretch your legs, gently nudge Emperor Muse Tinian off your lap, and wander over to the shelf of finished candles. One in particular catches your eye, a fresh taper from this morning. Perfectly shaped, balanced like a dancer mid-pose. You pluck it, trim the wick just slightly, and set it on a stone plate. Time for a test burn. You light it carefully, shielding the tiny flame from the draft with your hand. The wick catches immediately, flaring into a proud little torch before settling into a steady glow. And for a moment, everything feels right. The glow reflects off the iron tools on the wall, dances in the curves of the drying rods, and softens the sharp lines of your workbench. It even makes the soot look poetic, like a cathedral ceiling painted in candle smoke. This is the best part of the day. The private moment of proof. A silent whisper from the flame saying, "Yes, I'll do what I was made to do." You pull up your stool, rest your elbows on the table, and just watch. Outside, you hear soft footsteps, measured, deliberate, then a brief knock, just 2 light taps, not urgent, not panicked. You open the door. It's her, Marina, the linen merchant's wife, or widow now. Technically, she wears the same midnight blue shawl she's worn since her husband's passing last winter. Though tonight there's a glint of brass at her collar. "Evening," she says, with a small smile. "Need light?" you ask, not bothering to hide your grin. She holds out a small cloth pouch. "Just 2 tapers. For reading. The new scrolls came in from Myra." You nod and step aside. She glances around your shop as if it's both familiar and slightly ridiculous. She's been here before, always at this time of day. Always with a quiet request and a bag of exact coin. "You restructured the rack," she says, pointing at your drying rods. You chuckle. "You noticed?" "I notice everything," she replies, with the kind of confidence only someone who has raised 3 children and negotiated silk prices with shouting men can manage. You pass her the tapers, slightly longer than usual, polished at the base so they'll sit snugly in her brass sconces. She tucks them into her pouch and reaches for the coins. You shake your head. Consider it a discount, for someone who notices racks. She smirks. "Then I'll expect the deluxe treatment next time. Maybe one of those scented ones that smells like almond bread in holy water." You raise an eyebrow. "That was one time, and it smelled like burnt church." She shrugs. "I liked it." Then, without fanfare, she disappears into the night. Footsteps soft against the stone. You close the door slowly. Historians still argue whether Byzantine women played a formal role in trades, or whether their involvement was always behind the scenes. You know for a fact Marina handled every order her husband ever made. The man couldn't count to 10 without using both feet and a borrowed hand. Back at the workbench, the test candle continues its graceful burn. You measure the melt pool with your eyes, wide enough to avoid tunneling, narrow enough to keep a steady flame. Perfect. You record a quick note on your scrapboard. Double twisted wick. Half beeswax blend equals ideal flow. Then you catch a beetle mid-dive with your hand before it crashes into the flame. It lands on your bench. Dazed, you pick it up gently and place it outside, whispering, "Not today, brave knight." As you return to your chair, you hear voices echoing from a nearby rooftop. Traders, maybe, or temple acolytes, once telling a story about a nobleman whose wig caught fire during a sermon. Apparently, he tried to extinguish it by rolling on the altar. You chuckle. That happened last week. The neighborhood's gossip ring is strong and oddly candle-centered. You decide to join them. Just for a little while. Grabbing your last candle stub and a bottle of something vaguely fermented. You make your way to the usual stoop 2 doors down. A handful of locals sit on worn cushions, passing a jug, tossing jokes, and stretching the day into the night like dough over a fire. They cheer when you arrive, not loudly. Just enough to make you feel welcome. You light your stub and place it in the center of the group. One man raises his jug and toasts, "To the wax wizard of Ash Street." You bow dramatically. "I prefer illumination engineer." The woman next to you snorts. "Heard you burned a mold again." You shrug. "It wanted to be free." Laughter rises. Stories begin. One man swears he saw a candle that burned upward, toward the ceiling. Another claims his wife's prayer candle cried actual tears. You debate the mechanics of wick tension with a man who once sold fermented goat milk as medicine. This, too, is part of the job. Not just the wax or the wick, but the stories. The way candles show up in people's lives. At weddings, funerals, vigils, birthday feasts. Light weaves through them all. As the night deepens and your candle burns low, you lean back against the wall, sip your drink, and let the laughter drift around you like smoke. You are a candle maker. And your light, however small, has traveled far today. Eventually, the bottle empties, the laughter quiets, and one by one the stoop dwellers rise, groaning like creaky floorboards and brushing crumbs from their tunics. Someone makes a joke about saving the rest of the wine for the next empire. And you all pretend it's funny even though everyone's too tired to laugh properly. You shuffle back to your workshop. Candle stub flickering low in your hand. The streets are empty now. Quiet, only the soft brushing of broom bristles from a night sweeper down the way. And the rhythmic clop of a mule cart somewhere near the aqueduct. The air has cooled, finally, not enough to stop the scent of tallow from clinging to your hair, but enough to let your shoulders drop, your breath lengthen, and your jaw unclench. You push open the workshop door and are greeted by the warm, familiar glow of your little test candle still burning peacefully on the bench. You exhale a sound that might be a sigh, or a yawn, or a low chant of existential survival. You're too tired to tell. As you settle onto your stool, you grab a small knife and begin shaving the bottom of another candle. Not for an order, just habit, smoothing the base so it stands up straighter. One less thing to worry about later. You've shaved hundreds, maybe thousands, of these waxy little soldiers. Most are gone now, melted into memory, flickering shadows on someone else's wall. There's a kind of strange satisfaction in that. Not permanence, but usefulness. Your thoughts drift again, to the candle you just gave Marina. To the temple orders. To the forge boy who still hasn't specified how many light sources for math he needs. To the apprentice kid who asked about fire snakes. To the fact that you've somehow become not just a craftsman, but a quiet fixture of the neighborhood. A sort of wax-scented constant. You shake your head, smiling. Not a bad fate. Then, bzzzt. A beetle dive bombs your perfect test candle. Again, it hits the flame with a tiny sizzle. Does a heroic little death spiral. And lands on the floor like a martyr to poor aim. You sigh, pick it up gently with a strip of old parchment, and place it outside, again. You swear they're trying to start a club. Inside, the room is settling. The heat from the forge has faded into a low, comfortable murmur. The last wax in the pot has solidified into a perfect amber sheen. Smooth as silk and cool to the touch. You run your finger along it, feeling the surface give slightly, almost like skin. You check the drying racks one last time. A few more taper bundles are ready to trim tomorrow. One has a small curve you'll need to heat and straighten. You note that with a piece of charcoal on the wallboard. Bent. Fix. Then, the shelf drawer creaks. You turn. It's Emperor Muse Tinian, pawing at your drawer of oddities. He pulls out the wax ball you made last winter, a lump of hardened scrap. Too big to melt and too ugly to sell. He bats it across the floor like a golden orb of indifference. You watch, mildly entertained. Careful, you mutter. That's got centuries of failure compressed in it. He doesn't care. He never does. You rise slowly, each joint cracking like walnuts under a boot, and begin snuffing out the remaining candles. One by one, tap, puff, darkness returns in careful increments, like closing a storybook in reverse. Except for the test candle. You leave that one burning. You grab your broom and do the evening sweep. A little soot here, a few stray wax shavings there. The occasional almond from someone's forgotten snack. It's all part of the rhythm. As you work, your thoughts drift again, this time further. To the fire temples in Persia where sacred flames burn for years without extinguishing. To the stories of candles made from whale blubber. Or of Roman lanterns buried with the dead, still faintly glowing when unearthed. To the superstition that if a candle flickers wildly, someone nearby is lying. You've watched candles stutter all day. No comment. Historians still argue whether candles were primarily tools or symbols, signs of wealth, hope, or piety. You've always believed they're just honest. A wick, some wax, a purpose. You finish sweeping, wipe your hands on your apron, and pour yourself a final mug of diluted wine. You raise it slightly to the candle. To not catching fire today. You toast. The flame dances in response. Outside, the night thickens. You hear the distant call of a night guard. The slow shuddering of a tavern. The sleepy chirp of birds that can't quite decide if they're nocturnal. You leave the door cracked for the breeze and sit, mug in hand, staring at the little flame. It's small, it's flickering, but it's enough. The cat climbs onto your lap, turns 3 times like a very judgmental pastry, and settles. You let your head rest back against the wall. The candle glows, and the world outside fades just a little further into quiet. You wake with a soft snort and a stiff neck, one hand still clutching an empty mug, the other pinned beneath a very smug-looking cat. Emperor Muse Tinian is warm and purring, a sound somewhere between comfort and domination. The test candle is still flickering beside you, though it's burned halfway down now. Its melt pool perfectly round. Its flame steady as if daring the night to challenge it. You gently move the cat, earning a grumble and stretch. Every vertebra protests. You've fallen asleep sitting up again. But in your defense, it's practically a tradition at this point. The workshop is dim but not completely dark. Pale moonlight spills through the window slats, washing over your tools and racks like a gentle glaze of silver. You stand and move quietly, respectfully. There's something sacred about a space like this at night. As though the walls themselves are holding their breath. And then, voices, low and conspiratorial, floating in from just beyond your door. You creep to the threshold and peer out. There they are, the neighborhood stoop circle, reassembled, rehydrated, and somehow louder. A cluster of traders, gossips, and resident eccentrics have gathered again. This time around a makeshift table with a clay lamp and what appears to be roasted chestnuts. One man's recounting the story of the Whig fire again, with extra hand gestures and a new bit about a dove flying overhead for dramatic effect. You step outside, arms crossed. Didn't the dove part happen last week? Demetrios? He gasps, hand to heart. You doubt the holy dove? Another man chimes in, mouth full. I thought it was a pigeon. A dove, Demetrios insists. A sign. You sit beside them, accepting a handful of chestnuts. They're warm, salted, and possibly stolen, but they're delicious. One of the women leans over. We heard you've been making experimental candles again. You raise an eyebrow. Define experimental. She leans closer. Someone said there was a scent. Almond, maybe. Something else? You sigh. I tried to replicate a sweetbread candle. It turned into burnt offering to the gods of indigestion. They laugh. One man nudges another. Told you it wasn't incense. I said, that smells like cake and despair. The moon continues to rise. casting soft shadows over the cobblestones and highlighting the creases in everyone's faces, the lines of laughter, worry, wind, and years. The stories flow, as they always do. One man claims he saw a candle that wouldn't go out, even when submerged in wine. Another says his neighbor's cat knocked over an altar candle and started a minor miracle, involving a pile of figs and a weeping statue. You suspect exaggeration, but you let it pass. Because this, too, is part of the night. The quiet rituals, the echoing laughter, the collective memory of a neighborhood that lives and breathes by the rhythm of its tradespeople and its tales. You lean back and let the warmth of the chestnuts and company wash over you. Historians still argue whether community life in Byzantium revolved around formal gatherings or spontaneous nightly routines like these. You'd argue this is the most real part of the city, a cluster of worn-out souls. Under a shared moon, eating questionable snacks and pretending they don't all smell like smoke. Eventually, someone begins snoring, openly, proudly, and the group begins to scatter. You bid them quiet good nights, with jokes about candle-powered beds and wax slippers, and return to your workshop. The test candle is almost gone now. Its base has puddled beautifully into a shallow dish of spent tallow. You let it burn a little longer. A small ceremony, just for you. You begin your nightly routine, sweeping again, brushing cooled wax from the benches, rearranging your tools so they're ready for tomorrow. It's a habit, a kind of meditation. You imagine each action is a way of resetting not just the room, but your brain. When everything is in place, you take the melted remains of the test candle, pour it into a small mold, and press a fresh wick into the center. Tomorrow's first flame. Then, another knock. You stare at the door. It's very late, even for priests, even for pigeons. You open it to find two monks. Robes dusted with road dirt, cheeks red from the night chill, eyes bright with purpose. We heard, one says, that you take custom orders. You eye them suspiciously. What kind of custom? The other steps forward, removing a cloth bundle from beneath his cloak. He unwraps it slowly, revealing a cracked ceramic reliquary shaped like a toe. We need a candle shaped like this, he says gravely, for the feast of St. George. You blink. You want a toe candle? He nods. An exact replica. Wax. Burnable. No scent. You're too tired to argue. Come back in 3 days. You mutter. They beam, bow deeply, and disappear into the mist like some very specific fever dream. You close the door, lock it this time, lean against it and laugh quietly into the darkness. You grab a lump of soft wax, examine the toe-shaped relic again, and make a note. Start sculpting the saintly toe. Monday. The candle's last flickers sputter behind you. You let it die gently. Tomorrow, you'll begin again. You rise early, as always. But slower this morning, your limbs thick with sleep, your hands still scented with last night's wax. The memory of the monk's toe request lingers in your brain like a particularly vivid dream. But no, it happened. You check the wax-stained note on your workbench to confirm. Start sculpting the saintly toe. Monday. Today is not Monday. You stretch, groaning like an old boat, and shuffle to the window. The light is faint and silvery. The kind that makes everything look a little softer, a little kinder. Constantinople hasn't fully stirred yet. The streets lie quiet, dusted with the last of the night's coolness. You light your first candle of the day, not out of necessity, but out of ritual. A stubby taper with a stubborn wick that flares angrily before settling into a calm glow. It's your favorite kind of flame, imperfect, but dependable. You pull your apron over your tunic, still a little damp from yesterday's sweat, and begin preparing the shop for another round of production. You check the wax stores, scrape a few hardened drips from the rim of your main cauldron, and sweep the floor for the third time in 12 hours. It's already cluttered with tiny wax curls, pieces of linen, and, of course, cat hair. Emperor Muse Tinian is perched on your shelf, staring at you with that gaze that says, "You live to serve me." You bow, sarcastically. He blinks. Relationship maintained. You're halfway through preparing new wig bundles when you hear the shuffling of sandals outside and low murmurs. Someone's approaching. Again, you brace yourself. It's a pair of older women from the far end of the neighborhood. One of them's missing an earring and the other smells like pickled radish and incense. They walk into your shop like they own it. "We need a candle," the first one says. For a wedding. You nod. That's reasonable. With a horse on it. The other adds. Pulling a cart, says the first. With a goose inside the cart. The second insists. Eyes wide with conviction. You pause. A bit stunned. A goose. They nod in unison. The second woman leans in. Symbolism. You don't ask. Instead, you reach for your mold scraps and start mentally sketching how to build a miniature wax cart. Harness. And one possibly deranged-looking goose. You've made worse. Once, you crafted a candle shaped like Saint Basil arm wrestling a lion. It burned unevenly and caused mild panic during a funeral. You've since labeled that mold, not for public use. Historians still argue whether decorative candles were purely ceremonial or had household superstitions tied to them. You've made enough bizarre requests to know it's both. There are households that light specific shapes for good fortune, fertility, harvest blessings, even for keeping away nosy neighbors. That one didn't work, by the way. You take down a small block of beeswax, reserved for special projects, and begin sculpting. The horse is the hardest part. You do your best. It ends up looking more like a particularly muscular goat. Close enough. Lovely, one woman cries. Clapping. You smile, genuinely touched by her joy, and wrap the candle in a bit of soft cloth. They leave, whispering about whether they should request a companion piece featuring the groom being chased by the goose. You don't ask. You don't want to know. As the morning wears on, the neighborhood comes alive. There's the usual parade of carts, dogs, and disgruntled merchants. The fishmonger has a new apprentice who insists on yelling the names of his seafood as if they're battle cries. Squid, mussels, writhing eels. You shut the window. You're mid-dip on a batch of stubby night tapers when the forge boy from the copper quarter finally returns. Same sandals, same vague look of confusion. You said come back, he says. I did. He holds out a hand with 2 small bronze coins and a drawing that looks like it was done by a sleepy octopus. These are lights for our forge, he says. For math. You try to decipher the drawing. It may be a table. It may be a cow. How many candles? You ask. Delicately. He squints at the paper. Maybe 6? You sigh and begin gathering the stubby candles from your reject but still works pile. They're not pretty, but they burn steady. You pack them in a cloth bag, tie it shut, and hand it over. The boy smiles. Thanks, Mr. Waxman. He trots off, sack swinging like he's carrying treasure. You finish the batch you were dipping, set it to dry, and finally, pause for food. Your lunch today is barley bread, slightly stale, and 2 roasted onions from your neighbor, who claimed they were blessed by St. Lawrence, patron of grilling. You're not sure if that's true, but they're surprisingly good. You sit in your doorway, letting the light fall across your knees, and chew slowly. You think about the absurd variety of orders you've received. The temples, the monks, the goose cart ladies, the curious apprentices, the never-ending parade of people who need light but rarely wonder where it comes from. You think about the quiet pride of watching a taper you made glow on someone else's altar, or in their window, or at the center of their birthday feast. You think about the wax, the wick, the burn, and you smile, because your hands may ache, your clothes may reek, and your cat may judge you daily. But you make the darkness a little smaller. And that, you think, is enough. The sky deepens to that rich Byzantine violet, the kind that makes rooftops glow and window shutters blush. You've seen this hour 1,000 times, but it never gets old. It's the candle hour, not quite dark, not quite light, the moment the world tips gently toward shadow, and your handiwork starts to matter again. You strike a flint and light 3 of your newest tapers, just dipped, just trimmed. Their flames bloom slowly, casting long lines across the workbench. The flicker is steady, their scent faint and almost sweet. They're good, very good. And yet, you catch your reflection in the burnished back of a pewter spoon. Your face says otherwise. Exhaustion has etched itself into your brow. Your hands are covered in faint red lines from string and trimming knives. There's a wax drip on your shoulder that may have been there since Tuesday. And something about your expression says, if one more monk shows up asking for a candle shaped like a holy animal, I will throw myself into the cauldron. You need rest, but you also need to finish shaping tomorrow's batch of altar tapers before the wax fully cools. So, you get up, back to work. You hum a little tune under your breath. A lullaby your mother used to sing while plucking geese, a fitting anthem for the night's labor. It helps. Halfway through bundling the new tapers, you hear it again. Soft scratching at the door. You freeze, candle in hand. The scratching continues. Then, a knock. Not urgent, not loud, just persistent. You crack the door open. 2 monks. Of course. One is tall and scowling. The other is shorter and appears to be carrying something under a velvet cloth. You blink. Unless that's St. George himself under there. I'm not taking new orders. The shorter monk smiles. Not an order. A blessing. He lifts the cloth to reveal a toe candle. Your toe candle. The one you'd sculpted 2 days ago as a joke, intending to remelt it after delivering the normal ones. They hold it aloft as if it's a relic. The abbot said it was inspired. The tall monk mutters, clearly annoyed at having to say the word. You don't know whether to be flattered or deeply concerned. So you came to return it? Commission more. The short one grins. We need a set for the altar. You lean on the doorframe. A set of wax toes. 8, possibly 12, depending on the hymn schedule. You stare at them. You've dipped thousands of candles in your life. You've shaped hearts, coins, doves, even a loaf of bread that one merchant swore cured his indigestion. But you never imagined ending your career in a blaze of glory by becoming the toe candle guy. You accept the request with the dignity of a man who has accepted many strange things. They leave, nodding deeply, murmuring prayers as if you are now part craftsman, part saint. Emperor Muse Tinian wanders in from the back, yawns, and hops onto your bench. He sniffs the toe candle, flicks his tail, and promptly sits on your new altar taper bundle. Typical. You shoo him off gently and return to your evening checklist. You oil your wick knife, clean the trimming box, stack the scraped wax chips for tomorrow's melting. You rub your shoulder and wince. Definitely pulled something lifting the crate earlier. Outside, a child runs past yelling about a ghost in the well. You hear sandals slapping, a shout, then silence. Could be a ghost, could be just someone's laundry flapping wrong. You grab your last candle of the day, set it in your bedroom niche, and light it with care. The room glows softly, familiar, safe. Your bed is a straw mattress laid atop 3 stacked crates and 1 suspiciously bent plank. But it's yours. You sit, stretch, and slowly peel off your tunic, now stiff with sweat and wax. As you settle in, you hear the wind brushing past your shutter. A reminder. The city doesn't sleep. Not really. Not the guards walking the walls. Not the bakers kneading tomorrow's dough. Not the traders sneaking in under moonlight with contraband figs and possibly cursed trinkets. And certainly not you, when there are toe candles to consider. Historians still argue whether the craftspeople of Constantinople ever truly rested, or if the demands of the capital kept them half awake forever. You'd say rest comes in layers, like wax. Thin, sometimes patchy, but eventually enough to hold a flame. You let your body sink into the mattress. The candle flickers gently in the corner. The room smells of linen and old smoke. And just as your eyes close, you hear a soft rustle at the door. You don't open them. You just whisper, "No more monks tonight." The rustle fades. You smile, even as sleep wraps around your limbs like warm wax. Let the night do its work now. Your hands have done enough. You wake before the candle guttering in your niche goes out entirely. Its flame wobbles like it's unsure whether to fight or fold. You whisper, "Good job," and let it die with dignity. Stretching out from your straw mattress, you wince at the familiar symphony of popping joints. You slept. Technically, but your spine would disagree. You swing your legs over the edge and feel the chill of early morning on the soles of your feet. Outside, the city stirs slowly. You hear the telltale bray of a donkey, the faint rattle of market stalls being assembled, and the sing-song call of someone selling warm bread. For a second, you consider abandoning your trade for a roll stuffed with cheese and sweet herbs. But the toe candle order awaits. You dress with the solemnity of a man preparing for absurd greatness. Tunic, apron, the wax-spotted sash you now refer to as your ceremonial belt, ever since the monks started treating you like some kind of sacred artisan. Your tools are exactly where you left them, because no one else would dare touch them. The cat tried once. You still have the scratch on your forearm to prove it. You warm a fresh pot of beeswax and set aside your sculpting implements, 2 dull knives. The rounded edge of a spoon. A bit of bent copper wire. And what was once a chopstick from a foreign trader. Candle tow making is not glamorous. But you are, by now, a master of the niche. You shape the first toe slowly, layering the wax bit by bit, pressing it against the mold with practiced fingers. The nail curve, the knuckle bump, a little too lifelike, perhaps, but the monks wanted realism. Historians still argue whether devotional candles in Byzantium were meant to be symbolic or literal representations. Some say candles shaped like saints' relics were a form of waxed prayer. Others think they were just creative fundraising. Either way, you now hold what is unmistakably a foot digit in your hand. You line it up with yesterday's version and nod. Yes, you say aloud, that's a toe. The cat watches you with open disdain. You spend the next hour creating 3 more, somewhat matching. Though one has a heroic bend that makes it look mildly accusatory. You stack them on a tray, tuck it in a cloth, and set it beside the door. The bell rings. Not metaphorically, literally. Someone strung an actual bell to your workshop handle and you've been too tired to remove it. You open the door. It's the boy apprentice again. Breathless, eyes wild. There's a cart, he pants. In the square, a whole cart of stolen wax. You blink. What? He waves his arms. It tipped over. No one's claimed it. It's everywhere. Now, you've seen many strange things. Monks requesting tow candles. Cats wearing fig leaves. A nobleman trying to light incense with a torch. But an unclaimed cart of wax? That's practically divine intervention. You follow him through the winding alleyways to the market square. There it is. A toppled cart. Barrel cracked. Spilling golden wax across the stones like a feast for ants. Several neighbors stand nearby, unsure whether to take or flee. You step forward. Dip a finger in the wax. Still warm. Good quality. Sweet smell. No signs of herbs or resin. It's beeswax. You murmur. Someone gasps like you just revealed a lost scripture. You clear your throat and do what any proper candlemaker would. Pretend it's a community emergency. Right, you say. We need buckets, cloths, spatulas, towels. This wax must not be wasted. A few people nod and scatter. You start scooping with your sleeve. An hour later, you've filled 4 jars with the good stuff. Some of it's dirtied, some will need straining, but it's a windfall. The forge master stops by, squints at the mess, and mutters, "No one saw a thing." You nod solemnly. So it was a gift. And just like that, you have enough beeswax for a whole week's worth of high-quality tapers. You return to the shop triumphant. Muse Tinian gives you a slow blink. Unimpressed by your heroic wax harvesting tale. You spend the rest of the afternoon cleaning the new wax, straining it through cloth, and melting down old scraps to make room. The shop smells like honey, fire, and accomplishment. You light a test taper from the new batch. It burns clean, bright, with barely a wisp of smoke. You whisper to the flame. You came from chaos. And now? You bring light. The last tow candles are boxed, tied, and labeled, monk order, handle with confusion. You stack your tools. You wipe the table. The city hums around you. Evening creeping in. Another day done. Another dozen flames waiting to be lit. Another page in the long, quiet, waxy history of a craftsman who never asked for glory, but somehow ended up with relic-shaped candles and unclaimed divine wax. You stretch your back, stifle a yawn, and reach for your sleeping candle. The one you burn only once the work is done. Its flame curls softly into life. Like a whisper, like a sigh, and the night presses in. Now, you rest. The last of the city's noises melt into a distant hush. The flicker of your candle slows, gently lapping at the shadowed walls like waves brushing a quiet shore. You stretch out on your straw bed, worn and uneven, but familiar, shaped to your body in a way only years of repetition could form. The room is wrapped in amber light. Outside, the moon sits high, lazily watching over Constantinople as if reluctant to sleep. The wax scent lingers, sweet, earthy, grounding. You breathe it in, letting your muscles soften one by one. Shoulders first, then your fingers, then the small knot behind your left knee that always protests a long day standing. Everything slows now. The flames, your thoughts, the whole wide, burning world. Your candle glows beside you, not bright, not sharp, just enough to paint gentle shadows and kiss the dark back from your door. It hums in that silent way that only candlelight can. reminding you that even the smallest bit of light is enough. Even here, even now, you've shaped the day, melted it, molded it, trimmed its edges, and now it holds still for you. Tomorrow will come, with more wicks, more wax, more strange requests. But tonight, there is nothing to fix, nothing to carry, nothing to burn, only the softness of sleep, and the slow, golden breath of a candle, steady and kind. Sleep well, candle maker. The flame will keep watch.